The G.I. Joe codenamed Grand Slam is one of the original Joes of the first 3.75-inch G.I. Joe team, debuting in 1982 as the Laser Artillery Soldier. Let's talk about him. Thanks for watching JLS Comics. If you do like the video, hit the thumbs up and subscribe. I upload videos just like this every week. Okay, let's jump into our story. Born in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin as James J. Barney, it was known from an early age that James was different. He was a quiet, introverted kid who preferred reading comic books and fantasy novels by himself than to being the center of attention in a large crowd. In the course of his reading, he learned all about castle sieges and started building his own models of ancient battlefields and working trebuchets, and through this, he developed an uncanny knack for accurately estimating distances and developed skills as an electronics engineer, which is what he did prior to joining the military. James then enlisted in the United States Army, where he passed through basic and AIT, and then graduated top of his class at Special Weapons School and Advanced Technology School, which is where he learned more about laser weapon systems. One of the exercises, which was part of the Indirect Fire Support training program, was to direct mortar fire onto a target downrange, but with no computer assistance. So James used his Army survey map, a protractor, a lensatic compass, and the range angles listed in the firing table in the back of the 81mm mortar field manual to calculate range to target in just 33 seconds, which landed him a direct hit, something the rest of his class had trouble with. One of the people observing this particular exercise was none other than a colonel named Clayton Abernathy. James was now on his proverbial radar. James had landed his direct hit with his first calculations, which proved incredibly accurate, but he should have still double-checked his numbers, which is what the colonel reprimanded him on. James was a natural fit for artillery, and he went on to field artillery school at Fort Sill in Oklahoma. Through all that training, James gained intimate knowledge of 155mm batteries, the M198, M119 series, M777 series, towed howitzers, and self-propelled equipment like the M109 Paladin, and even the ANTPQ Firefinder mobile radars. He's also proficient with MLRS, HARMs, and even strikers. James would be the guy to fire the XM1299 rocket-assisted projectile from a M109A7 Paladin PIM with an ERCA 50 caliber barrel and land a round on target at 43 miles out with no electronic guidance. James excels as a forward observer, a gunner, and can run the FDC and be a fire direction officer like no one else. Hell, he can be HCO and VCO. This means he can join an armored brigade combat team, an infantry brigade combat team, or a striker brigade combat team. James could be the whole BCT or FA battalion if he needs to be, so he's more than just 13 Bravo, 13F, 13M, 13J, 13R. The list of MOSs goes on. He does have primary, secondary, and many alternate MOSs, but I know, this is fiction, just go with it. As noted on his 2006 file card, James' ability to estimate distance and plot trajectories is exceptional. He can set up just the right artillery attack to soften up the enemy, cause general confusion, or destroy entrenched fortifications. He's fascinated with artillery of the past and has built miniature versions of catapults and trebuchets, experimenting with them on team members who didn't mind being bombarded with a volley of small stones and stale bread rolls. He is quoted as saying, "With some M1 mortars, howitzers, and M203 grenade launchers, I'll have the enemy worn down and ready to fall in no time." It was this wealth of experience and General Hawk's own recommendation after seeing him during field training exercises that landed James a spot on Brigadier General Lawrence Flagg's new Special Counter-Terrorist Group Delta, codenamed G.I. Joe. He went through the PCS process and was assigned to a top-secret underground bunker beneath the U.S. Army Chaplain's Assistant Motor Pool at Fort Wadsworth. So now on the G.I. Joe team, James took on the codename Grand Slam and quickly familiarized himself with their unique equipment like the HAL, Heavy Artillery Laser, and the Jump Jetpack. Though it was published in 2006, Snake Eyes Declassified was a story about the first days of the team. In the book, Grand Slam was at roll call at the pit when Generals Austin and Flagg appeared for the first time to survey the new base and meet their newly stood-up force. This was the same with the 2006 G.I. Joe Declassified miniseries, which told the story of the days just before and just after the Joe's first published mission. In this story, Grand Slam was at the pit monitoring a mission that Stalker, Rock and Roll, Grunt, and Zap were on down in Sierra Gordo at the time when Sergeant Jody Shooter Craig showed up at the pit. Grand Slam and Short Fuse were trying to get Hawk on the horn as the Sierra Gordo op was suddenly foobar. The team kitted up in full combat loadout, but Hawk told them to stand by. Little did they know that a sniper named Shooter, that's Jody Craig, had already been deployed to Sierra Gordo as a failsafe. Chronologically, Grand Slam first appeared in Larry Hama and Marvel Comics' first issue of G.I. Joe: A Real American Hero. He was activated again for Operation Lady Doomsday after Cobra kidnapped Dr. Adele Burkhart. When Clutch drove Colonel Hawk into the G.I. Joe Command Center, he ran into Grand Slam, Zap, Steeler, and Rock and Roll before taking the vehicle down to the sublevels underground. It was Grand Slam who sent the Vamp with Hawk and Clutch down the hydraulic lift. Meaning, not only was Grand Slam one of the OG Joes, he was also one of the very first we meet after that computer readout introduction in an earlier panel. For the operation, Grand Slam joined Hawk, Rock and Roll, Zap, Steeler, and Clutch as the heavy assault team, tasked with attacking Cobra's island fortress via a LCT, that's landing craft tank, inserted via beach assault. So on the beach, Grand Slam broke left with Clutch and a Vamp. Further inland, Grand Slam set up the towed heavy artillery laser, and between them and Steeler's MBT, they took out an entire Cobra tank column. An RPG strike, though, took out the tank, and so Hawk and Steeler and Zap jumped on the Vamp and towed Hal, joining Grand Slam and Clutch, continuing to press forward. Cobra Commander and Baroness had Dr. Burkhart, Snake Eyes, and Scarlet trapped behind a hardened steel door, and so Grand Slam is the one who used the Hal heavy artillery laser to blast that hardened steel door right open, allowing the rest of the team to breach and save the Doctor and their two teammates. After dust-off for the evac, they blew up the castle along with their heavy gear and vehicles. And, little did they know, Shooter went up with the blast. This also included Grand Slam's Hal, but they knew General Austin would be able to procure more equipment for them. So mission accomplished. After that mission, the team never really knew what the contribution that Sergeant Craig had, nor did they know it was her bravery and her sacrifice that contributed to them completing Operation Lady Doomsday. Despite that, they were all present at her honor ceremony. Grand Slam's next mission was to recover a top-secret Russian anti-gravity-powered spycraft that landed in the Hindu Kush mountain range in Afghanistan. Hawk assigned Grand Slam, Stalker, Scarlet, Clutch, Steeler, and Breaker to the mission, along with an RTV, that's a rough terrain vehicle, and a Vamp to get overland to the crash site. However, somebody along the way got confused because it was suddenly Flash on this mission and not Grand Slam, with no explanation as to why. Although, I can see that being the case, being that this was the pre-Silver Pads era of Grand Slam's life. In issue 11, when the team was in the Alaskan tundra protecting the oil pipeline from Cobra, Grand Slam, Steeler, and Short Fuse were all hit and wounded after Cobra knocked out a Mobat and the heavy artillery cannon. So after Wild Bill and Doc touched down with a helicopter, they were all medevaced back to base camp. And because of this, Grand Slam was off the board for a while until it was all hands on deck to repel the Cobra invasion in Washington, D.C. In the aftermath of that battle, Major Blood hijacked a bus that was stopped at a northbound toll booth on the highway. It just so happens that Stalker was parked nearby with a Ram motorcycle that also had Grand Slam on the back as a rider. So they quickly peeled off the curb and chased the bus, and in the rolling gunfight, Stalker pulled the Ram up to the left side of the bus, and Grand Slam jumped off and on to the bus, climbing right up onto the roof. Then he swung in and crashed through the glass front windshield, planting his combat boots into the face of Major Blood amidst a flurry of shattered glass all around them. Major Blood fell to the ground right next to a disguised Scarface. Grand Slam then struck Major Blood with a massive right hook that cracked Blood's face and skull and knocked him out so hard that he had to go to the nearby hospital's emergency room for blood transfusion and care from the fracture team before being locked in the brig at the pit. Stalker reprimanded his soldier Grand Slam. "I told you to subdue the man, not tap dance on his head. Major Blood has got some serious talking if his jaw's busted," and then James defended himself. "Cut me some slack, Stalker," he said. "I only hit him once or twice, 3 or 4 times at the most. Honest. Half a dozen tops." They ended up bringing Major Blood, Scarface, and a heavily bandaged Baroness back to the Fort Wadsworth pit for detention. So Grand Slam was there when Cobra attacked with an assault force of Fangs and his tanks in an attempt to recover their agents. In issue 59, Grand Slam was in the desert, somewhere in central Utah, in an Striker helping to test out the new Slam. Seems apropos, right? Grand Slam testing the Slam, which is the Strategic Long-Range Artillery Machine. The comic book, though, calls it the Strategic Long-Range Assault Machine. At the end of the field test, the convoy headed back through the desert and into the Rockies as Hawk told them to report to Fort Carson in Colorado. On the way back, while sitting in the rear of the APC, Grand Slam told Tunnel Rat that he'd been traveling around so much and in the field lately so much that he hadn't been able to collect his pay in 2 months. So that's when Tunnel Rat produced his G.I. Joe credit card and said, "Hey, I'll spot you some cash." And so then Grand Slam helped in the firefight that ensued immediately after this interaction, where Cobra Commander attacked this convoy in a pogo right before they entered a tunnel in the Rockies. And then, as more and more specialists and operators came onto the team, Grand Slam faded into the background, primarily assigned to base duty now. In fact, in issue 82, Grand Slam was with Roadblock in the mess hall prepping food for the new recruits like Budo, Icepick, Lightfoot, Repeater, Funky, No-Show, and Blister. The shook trainees referred to Grand Slam as Drill Sergeant. Grand Slam took Budo, Repeater, and Lightfoot, who were the ones who won out in the training in a Tomahawk to recon the Picatinny Arsenal at the U.S. Army Proving Grounds nearby. Grand Slam and his 3 new Joes were tasked with securing one of the exits, while the rest of the team made contact at the main buildings. As they covered both sides of the road, they heard mortar rounds and gunfire from a recoilless rifle. They were still unsure if this was a training op or not. Then a truck full of stolen equipment made a run for the exit that they were covering, and Grand Slam was struck and hit with multiple rounds, and he went down. Repeater quickly took charge of the area, directing Budo and Lightfoot to recover Grand Slam and hold off the truck. Then a Cobra heavy lift helo came in and swooped up the truck with the stolen equipment, but Lightfoot had managed to plant a time delay mine on it, and the truck and the helo blew up midair. When the Tomahawk returned, the team stretchered Grand Slam away, and that was the last of his Marvel-era AR-AH story. He wouldn't be in the main title again until issue 200, when most of the G.I. Joe team was down in Sierra Gorda for the Bob Graves rescue op, and just after Cobra evacuated the pit that they controlled for the briefest amount of time. Joe Colton had showed up with reinforcements, and he said he took the liberty of calling in the Joes who were on other assignments at other bases. So CoverGirl rolled up in an APC and offloaded Steel Roller, Armadillo, Steeler, Long Range, Rumbler, and Grand Slam. They all jumped out and reported for duty. Then they all rode out in a massive armored cavalry charge to pursue the retreating Cobra forces. Grand Slam then appeared in issue 269, directing loadouts on the tanks along with Steeler, Rollbar, and Crankcase. This was in preparation for the rescue operation to get Sean Collins' throwdown out of Springfield, where he was trapped by Cobra and Laura 343. So Grand Slam hopped on and drove one of the buses headed to Springfield for the rescue mission. Top put a hand on his shoulder and said, "Roll out, Grand Slam." And so he continues to be an active part of the G.I. Joe roster, albeit a small background part, but with his quiet, introverted demeanor, this fits him rather well. In the second volume of G.I. Joe, the one by Josh Blaylock through Image Comics and Devil's Due Publishing, Grand Slam was on Assault Team Beta for Phase 2 of the invasion of a Serpentor-controlled Cobra Island. They were to deploy via LCAC to the beach as fire support for Assault Team Alpha. Though the team prevailed, they took heavy losses, and so most of the Joes were put on mandatory leave to grieve and deal with their emotions and loss. Duke assembled a skeleton crew to oversee the pit during this period, and one of those chosen for the skeleton crew was Grand Slam. So outside the pit, now located in Arizona, the team put together a baseball game. They didn't have much to do with not many people around. In the baseball game, Hardball was pitching to Grand Slam. Finally, his name used for what it means, though he wasn't able to contact the ball with his wooden bat. Duke called the team below for roll call on evening duty assignments. Shipwreck told Duke that he and Grand Slam would take on the chicken wings and hard grape soda mission, but Duke said no, you need to do a cleanup job first. That cleanup mission turned out to be a snatch and grab operation. This conspiracy theorist named Scott Sturgis had photographed the pit, so Shipwreck and Grand Slam, clad in Cobra Viper gear, broke into Scott's house and injected him with a saline solution, and he passed out from the fright. But back at the pit, when Scott reawoke, Duke was able to play the antidote angle to extract what he needed from Scott Sturgis. And at the pit, Duke told Grand Slam and Shipwreck to ditch their Viper gear and get to making that dinner that they were talking about earlier. Grand Slam was next on guard duty at Blackwater Prison when Wraith broke in and freed Major Blood and Scrap Iron. In one corridor, the three Cobra ran into Grand Slam, Beachhead, and Shipwreck. Wraith punched Shipwreck and Beachhead, and so Grand Slam fired off some Apex rounds that hit Wraith center mass, singing, "My name is Grand Slam and I just shot a mini grenade up your..." But it didn't work. Wraith was armored up, and he rose up from the ground and unleashed a salvo of Hornet's Nest rounds that struck Grand Slam, and he went down with the rest of the team. Luckily, these were less than lethal rounds. Grand Slam and the team were alive, but Wraith, Scrap Iron, and Major Blood managed to escape. Grand Slam was then at the meeting with the original Joes, the last of the first chosen Joes, as Duke announced that Hawk was stepping down as commander. Word had come down from the Pentagon after Hawk was shot and paralyzed. Then, as people like the Jugglers, Mars Herring, and Generals Gibbs and Ray circled the wagon, smelling blood in the water, the G.I. Joe team was ordered to be cut down to just 12 active field agents. Grand Slam was one of those 12. Then Destro ordered Mistress Armada to lead an attack on the pit to extract the Joes while Dr. Knox took the Tempest device to Cobra Island. So in that battle, Grand Slam was on a Rolling Thunder, taking out Dominators with the main 90mm cannon. But then the cannon was taken out with a missile strike and they were overrun by Night Vipers. Grand Slam yelled to Shockwave to shut the blast door to the pit to prevent the Vipers from invading, and Shockwave complied, crushing a Viper in the process. Grand Slam was also part of the massive 236-member duty roster group photo in America's Elite issue 25. In Chuck Dixon and Alex Cal's 2009 IDW series G.I. Joe Origins, Grand Slam was on the insertion retrieval op on the shore of the Black Sea, and right in front of Mainframe, Grand Slam was hit in the face with a round from a sniper, and so Duke had Rock and Roll carry Grand Slam's lifeless body out of the AO to the rib waiting for them off the coast. Grand Slam also showed up in Aubrey Sitterson's 2016 G.I. Joe series that spun out of IDW's Revolution event. He was at an EDC facility on Bikini Atoll, the site where Scarlet sent a team to extract their assets, like Grand Slam. So Rock and Roll ran into Grand Slam at the base and shot him in the face. So once again, Grand Slam was struck down, hit, and this time he was paralyzed. They thought that Grand Slam was one of the Dire Wraiths, those evil shape-changing villains from the ROM Space Knight stories. But despite being paralyzed, this Grand Slam continued on with the team. He contributed his head of knowledge and expertise to the team, although he held a deep-seated grievance to his fellow Joes for taking away his ability to walk. For example, in G.I. Joe First Strike, he was building equipment at G.I. Joe Earth Defense Force's Lemuria base and was pissed that the guy who paralyzed him got to go out on a mission with a newbie while he was stuck on base. Guess I know my role around here, he said angrily as he rolled away. He'd be happy to know that Larry Hama brought him out of the chair for the IDW relaunch of ARAH, which we talked about a moment ago, and thus ends Grand Slam's comic book appearances. Believe it or not, despite being one of the original Joes with the early 80s relaunch, Grand Slam never made it to the Sunbow animated series. The only place he was animated was for toy and comic issue commercials. For example, in the commercial for the first issue of the comic book series, Grand Slam was drawn animated right next to Flash, both of them clad in their red laser trooper armor. Grand Slam's V1 figure was released in 1982, where he was boxed with the HAL. In 1983, Grand Slam was boxed with the Jump jetpack. And in 1988, a Transformers Autobot cassette was released named Grand Slam that transformed from mini cassette to Cybertronian tank, and then, when combined with Rain Dance, formed Slam Dance, though obviously this was not the same Grand Slam as with G.I. Joe. Fast forward many years, and in 2006, Grand Slam was released as a direct-to-consumer figure, sold only through some internet websites. Grand Slam was again boxed with the Jump jetpack in 2007. This version was a convention exclusive. There was also an 8-inch Grand Slam that year as part of the Sigma 6 line. The next year, 2008, Grand Slam was boxed with the Night Spectre vehicle, repainted Shark, for the Attack on Cobra Island sets through Target stores. And then Grand Slam had two figures in 2009. One was boxed with an Air Assault Glider for a Target exclusive set, and the second where he came with a laser artillery weapon for a Walmart Battle Stations exclusive set, both of which were as part of the Rise of Cobra line. And finally, his 2014 figure was released as part of the G.I. Joe Collectors Club figure subscription service. Where will Grand Slam show up next? With a bunch more G.I. Joe on the way in the future, it's only a matter of time, so we'll have to wait and see. Until then, that's a wrap on this, my friends. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and you'll be one of the first to know when I upload videos. I'm Jesse, this is JLS Comics, and I'll see you soon.